Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqna.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to hear from Sue Beer and Emma Roberts. Sue and Emma are the co-founders of the EFT Centre in London. They are two of the first 10 practitioners in the world to be awarded the title of EFT Master by Gary Craig, the founder of EFT. Sue and Emma are international trainers, presenters, and writers. They both have private online practices in London, which specializes in using EFT to help people change and find meaning in their lives. They've worked together for many years and are renowned for the strength of their working relationship, as well as their skills introducing seemingly complex ideas with clarity and simplicity. They are passionate about their work and are recognized for their ability to create profound change in an atmosphere that is fun, lighthearted, and filled with love. Please, please, please welcome to the virtual stage for the 24 Hours of Tapping, Sue and Emma. One of the things that I think is always really, really important when we're having a conversation is to define our terms, not because like I need you to agree with my definition or vice versa, but it just makes communication significantly easier. And fortunately, we live in a time where we feel safe, we feel comfortable. There's lots of opportunities and avenues for us to talk about trauma. And with that being said, it's a word that can very easily become overloaded. I can meet it in a casual way. Oh my gosh, the trip to the airport was so traumatic, which is different than some sort of complex trauma that happened because of something in my life. So when you all are talking about and thinking about trauma and working safely with traumas, as helpers, as tappers, as etc., how do you define trauma so we can just kind of use that as a jumping off point for creating something constructive here?
Do you want to go or shall I go?
You go.
I mean, we define trauma as, well, in essence, there's two sorts of traumas. The big T trauma, which is the big one-off thing that happens, which is very easy to work with tapping, actually, and to clear. And the little T traumas, which are the much harder things to actually dig out and uproot with tapping, which is the stuff of everyday life that could happen in your childhood. It could be your mum always yells at you or whatever it happens to be, but the response, the traumatic response is the same. So I guess that's how we approach it. And it's actually our thinking that creates the traumatic response, not the actual thing that happened. It's what we make it mean, what beliefs we have from it, and how it impacts it, how it shows up in our everyday life today. So
what do you mean by that? Like, not what happened, but how we interpreted what had happened. Give me a little more context and flesh to what you mean by that idea.
Okay, well, two people can experience the same thing, can't they?
Mm-hmm.
And one person people will probably both be traumatized, but one person will just shake it off and move forward in their lives, and the other person will give it meaning, or that means I must be a really bad person, or that happened to me because I'm always really unlucky, or whatever it happens to be. And then that belief gets attached to, like attracts like. So that belief attracts other things. We then experience other events in our life through the filters of that thinking, if you like. So the meaning that we gave the event.
So as you're saying that, it reminds me of, they did a study after one of the horrific bombings in the London tube system. And one of the questions that they asked people who were trapped in the tube system was, were you able to send a text message out and get a text message back? And they found that if someone was able to send something out and get a text message back, they didn't feel isolated. Even though when you are in rush hour on a tube car, you're like packed in there with sardines with other humans, it doesn't mean that you are necessarily engaged with them or feel connected to them. And
No.
so they were having the exact same experience, but because the person who was able to send a message out to a loved one and get something back, or someone they knew, they didn't feel isolated. So they interpreted the circumstance in the moment differently because they didn't carry it with them, because it was horrific, but it wasn't isolating, and it wasn't telling me the story of bad things happen and then I am all alone inside of
Yeah.
that as we're navigating that in that particular way.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, actually, because it also probably means that the person didn't actually feel helpless, because the idea of helplessness is a really common in the formation of trauma. You know, it's a moment where, you know, we believe that we're completely helpless and powerless. So just being able to send a message would kind of override that, you know, that sense of helplessness, I think, and would mean that people would have a different, you know, a different perception afterwards. So interesting. Just one thing like that can make the difference between you know, us having a post-traumatic stress response and actually, you know, kind of just, you know, moving on. Particularly with a one-off event like that, you know, as Emma was saying, that you know, the big T trauma one-off events are actually, you know, often easier to, you know, to work with using you know, the tools that we have with EFT and along with EFT than the, you know, the kind of everyday mini T trauma, which is often not sort of clearly defined as a memory, because it, you know, it could be the tone of somebody's voice or the look on somebody's face, or, you know, the kind of repeated, you know, everyday kind of neglect that isn't necessarily kind of, you know, it doesn't register as a memory sometimes. Well, not sometimes, often, you know, it doesn't. And so it's harder for us to get at it, you know, when we're working with EFT as practitioners.
It gets normalized.
And it gets normalized, exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's something that's kind of interesting as we think about that, like the sense of normalization, is that if something feels normal, then we assume that is the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
And if we have a thought that is counter to that, that's saying, well, what about this? Maybe I should feel that. There's that sense of, well, this is the way the world works. And I have found that a significant portion of my work with clients is normalizing their emotional experience to what is going on. And it's almost like this is what feels like is culturally normative, and internally they're having something different, and giving ourselves permission to recognize that that thing that we're experiencing internally that is going against what is this cultural norm of what is going on, recognizing, oh no, not only is that valid, it's really, really useful, and we need to be paying attention to that particular thing, because it's so easy to feel like, oh, I'm the only one who's thinking this, or I'm the only one that's feeling this. Therefore, it is invalid in that particular way, because, you know, biologically, we just need to be part of the tribe, because 7,000 years ago, that's how we were safe. And anything that's countercultural to that feels dangerous internally, when what we're talking about here is just the opposite of that. If we interpret it as normal, what's going on out here, it's going to make it harder for us to do the work that we're doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I think one sort of observation that I've kind of made over time, you know, with clients, and, you know, and you know, I mean, just everybody's experience of this really is that what we kind of come to think of as normal has been normalized. This at some level I think of as being, you know, a kind of deeper wisdom. We absolutely know that it wasn't normal,
Right.
and that it was painful, and that it was whatever, you know, all of the things that are, you know, the kind of, you know, negative consequences or judgments that came with our experience, or kind of would have if it hadn't been normalized out of sort of feeling the appropriate things to it. There's a part of us that never kind of buys into, you know, the illusion or the delusion, and whereas we have various sort of defense mechanisms, that will kind of mean that our unconscious mind will keep us from feeling the painful feelings. We'll do this normalizing so that we get by and we survive very well. And it can be a really long journey to undo that normalization. But there's a part of us that this deeper wisdom that absolutely knows when things aren't right, when our experience wasn't right. And I just find that really kind of, it doesn't help us, we have to kind of protect ourselves from the pain, but just the idea that it does seem that all of us have this sort of this connection to something beyond our kind of physical sort of limited experience that transcends all of the pain and sort of is there and can kind of lead us out of the this sort of depths of pain that we might be in, but seem to struggle to get out of, because if you think something is sort of normal, then you don't kind of tend to address it. You don't address it in therapy, let alone kind of everyday life. But with the right kind of help and support and or self work, we can find that way out ourselves, when it's the right time. Maybe, I don't know, it's just something that I observe.
Yeah, and the other thing is even when we give ourselves permission to feel it, oftentimes we don't want to be burdened to someone else.
Yeah.
And so like we start to articulate what's going on. Oh, I'm sorry I said that. Oh, I'm sorry I'm feeling that. And as a helper, one of the things that I have found just like being a human in the world is when someone's expressing an emotion and they immediately start to backtrack and apologize, like just as a friend, I'm always like, no, you don't have to apologize for the way that you feel. You don't have to apologize for sharing how you feel with me right now. And just like that's a small thing that all of us can do as humans in the world, because those of us who exist in the transformational space, particularly those of us in the audience who are of the more empathic nature, are aware of the emotions of the people around us. We don't want to be a burden to the people around us. And so even if we give ourselves permission to feel, then all of a sudden we backtrack from that particular thing and just normalizing it in our lives, say, oh, no, it's okay. Say, share where you are. It's okay. You don't have to apologize for feeling that particular way, which then leads us to a more constructive conversation of how we can be a helper in that particular setting, even if it's just listening to a friend vent. Like there's a value inside of that particular thing as we're engaging with that experience that is so human of the pain, the suffering, the emotion that is there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that bears repeating. It's quite funny you should say that, because I was working with somebody this morning who kept saying sorry to me. I've worked with her for quite a long time. She goes, sorry, oh no, I'm allowed to feel it now. So it's sort of, we're edging to, she's giving herself permission, but it's repetition. I know what you're going to say. She says to me, I know you're going to say it's okay to feel, so I am going to feel this now. But it's taken months to get to that stage of repetition.
Yeah, I mean, one of the rules I have in my client sessions is my clients are not allowed to apologize for the emotion they feel. Because that's just not useful for us in that particular setting. And again, like as we demonstrate that it's appropriate, it's allowed, it's safe, it makes it easier. The exact same way that we have been enculturated to think not being in pain is unnormal, we can like start to turn that enculturalization around into a way that's something that's useful and helpful.
Completely. I mean, this is on automatic pilot, really, for her. She's been doing it since she was absolutely tiny as a survival mechanism. So it's quite radical in a way to be turning it around now. So she's turning around herself rather than I'm not having to do it all the time now. She's doing it for herself. And that's huge. It might sound kind of, for some people listening, it might sound like it's a tiny shift, but actually it's enormous.
No, it is an enormous shift, because it can come back as well, through the process of healing and change work. We'll often get to a kind of point of of compassion and understanding for the people around us. Okay, well, they were in Gary Craig's sort of phrase was that they were doing the best they could, with their limiting, beliefs and, their experience and upbringing and so on. And so, I've been working with a client recently she'll access feeling really quite, quite well without the apology, but then switch immediately into kind of, yes, but they were doing the best they could, which then sort of
Right.
stops the feeling. So it's a kind of more advanced version.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you're saying there, like, it is valid for me to recognize they're doing the best they can with the information they have, the resource state that they're in. And that doesn't mean I'm a doormat. And that doesn't mean that I allow them to act that way toward me. I'm able to recognize that's where they're coming from. And I'm allowed to have an emotional response to that particular thing. Like, it's not that, oh, once I walk a mile in your shoes, I understand you and I'm just going to allow, that's not it.
Yeah.
But like, for me, like, the goal is a proportionate, well-informed emotional response, you know? And like, you can accidentally elbow me in the nose, or you can elbow me in the nose. They hurt just the same. I am just as injured, but the way I'm responding to what's going on might be shaded by, was it intentional? Was it an accident? You know, and so as we say, I think it's important for us to underline as well that as we start to recognize what's going on, I can still be disappointed. I can still be frustrated. I can still be hurt, even if you're not acting out of a well-resourced state, because it's still impacting me. And I don't just get to give you a pass inside of all of this.
And that's a really important step in beginning to build personal boundaries, which a lot of people who've been seriously traumatized don't have,
Right.
in childhood. So to be able to kind of reclaim your power in that way is just so important. And I think the tapping kind of leads us to that.
Yeah.
We can tap through the things that have happened, but at the same time, we've got to be able to create that shift in ourselves or with other people. And to pick up on where Sue was coming from before, one of the ways of doing that is using the kind of the energy of the, whether you call it, we call it the energy of the heart, but whether you call it the higher power, God, whatever, but being able to access that and bring that into play, really, which we do through something called the heart anchor, but people do it with prayer, intention, whatever. It doesn't matter what label you put on it, but you've got to be able to, when you're working with people, I think it's really important to be able to capture those little moments where that shift is beginning to happen, feed that back.
And one of the ways I have found, like, entering into what you're talking about here, is paying attention to the time in our lives where we have been told we are too something. You're too emotional, you're too loud, you're too dramatic, you're too whatever it is. And again, as the sense of trying to belong and be safe, we start to internalize as, oh, it's normal for me not to act this way, not to feel this way, not to articulate this particular way. And almost always when someone's saying you're being too, they're making a statement about their resource state and what they have the capacity to handle right now. But we read it as, this is the way you're supposed to go in the world. And so a really interesting, easy entry point is go, okay, what have I been told I am too of? And how do I recognize the opposite? Like you're saying, bring that energy in wherever that source is, going, oh no, this is actually a really useful part of the human experience. And I can embrace, I can engage, I can amplify, I can tune up, I can give myself permission to feel those particular things.
Absolutely. Really important. I like the idea of getting through I am too, because you hear that all the time. I'm too dramatic, I was too loud, I was the show off, I was too big for my boots, is the expression we have over here. I hear from clients all the time, I was told this, I was too noisy, too loud, too whatever.
Yeah.
And it becomes even more complicated when we're told both of the things. You don't communicate enough and you're too loud, like you're too emotional. I don't know, like we get it coming and going. And then now, not only are we trying to keep this cultural norm, we're now trying to thread the needle between too much and not enough of the thing.
Impossible remit.
But I mean, most of us are carrying around conflicting beliefs like that without kind of questioning it at all. I'm too much and I'm too little. And we kind of we can fully believe both, and until we begin to question the whole thing, and also questioning what we thought that meant at the time when we were told it, because we're making these huge kind of decisions when we were age 3, 4, 5, 6 and that the thing was that chances are whoever said that to us at the time was just feeling a bit tired, a bit bored, they're
on a phone call and they're going, you're being too loud, because they're having a hard time hearing. And what we hear is, oh, I can't speak up. Like we
Yeah,
take
yeah.
this thing
I
and
can never speak out. I don't have a
we
voice.
extrapolate into that big thing.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
so one of the things that I appreciate in the conversation that we want to have here is the word safety. And just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I think one of the things I am most proud of the tapping community, in the last 15 years, is how we have grown up around this idea of safety. And so when you two are thinking about working safely with trauma, again, definition wise, like what does that mean for you, and how does tapping engage with that particular thing about its efficacy and its appropriateness as we think about that?
Well, that first of all, that means being very, very careful. You've got to create a safe environment for your client, the person you're working with, before you go anywhere near anything traumatic. Gary Craig calls it sneaking up, but it's all about the connection between you and the other person. If you don't have that connection, be it on Zoom or be it face to face, you're not going anywhere. And then once you've got that connection, it's still painstakingly careful work not to re-traumatize. The worst thing you can possibly do is storm in and re-traumatize. Okay, I know this happened to you. We're going to go there now and re-traumatize. This is why people leave therapy, actually. It happens less with the tapping, because we've got the way of bringing down the kind of the emotional intensity as we go along, but you still have to be incredibly careful and super alert. You've got to look at the nuances of everything, about all the unconscious signals, everything, real connection. It's not you and them, it's you're in it together. And you have to hold that space, because you've got the light to bring them out. You can lead them out. So it's you've got me on my hobby horse. Safety is the sort of
no, absolutely. I mean, like, it's one of the reasons why, like, I'm so impressed with the work that the Peaceful Heart Network does, and their TTT protocol is 100% wordless. And it comes from this experience of, Ganella was a journalist in East Africa, and reporting the news was re-traumatizing, and she realized, oh, this is something that is unsafe and is unuseful as we step into that particular thing. So I'm, like the biggest difference between me as a practitioner and me as a practitioner 7 years ago is the speed in which I work. And it is so much slower. In addition to kind of speed and going there, I would love to hear you also speak to competency, and how do we judge that as a practitioner? Like, for example, like tapping is super powerful for dissociated identity disorder, what we used to call multiple personality. And just because that's the case, I'm going to do more harm than good, because even though I'm a super skilled tapper, I am not super skilled with that particular area of mental health. And so as you are training and forming practitioners and your students, like, how do you think about competency and whether or not we know it's appropriate for us to, even if we're creating a safe space, even if we have the sense of rapport, how to do that in the safest way possible?
Well, I think it's important that practitioners are aware of their limitations, and if they're not already trained in an area, trained in working with mental disorders, or particular kind of psychiatric conditions, you might have slightly different terminology in the US compared to what we have here. Then I think don't go there. I mean, we are absolutely not saying that you can learn tapping on a 1-day training or a 3-day training and then start addressing schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or whatever. That's absolutely not. That's not what we're saying at all. But it's also possible to work with our own kind of emotional background without working without using words, so you can, even on yourself, you don't have to go into the content of a traumatic memory. It's possible to just use a title as a kind of code for everything that meant, and to do really significant work. But people must be aware that we're not equipped to work with anything that comes under the remit of medical disorders or psychiatric disorders, at all. It's not to say that people that are already trained in that area, can't do absolutely amazing work, and we know that there is work like that, being done right now, and has been over, at least the last 20 years or so. But it is about knowing what are your own limits, what are the parameters of what's safe for you, and the kinds of the kinds of people that you're likely to want to work with. But safety creates success, and it is possible to really transform one's background and experience, using the way that people can work, quite easily, really, given dedication and persistence and training that takes much longer than just doing a three-day training. There has to be more effort put into it, because you have to really want to do this work. You have to be sort of dedicated and committed to working with people, and of course that requires the respect of it being like a training that never really ends. You continue learning through all the experiences that you have, and I think that mindset is a really important part of how the whole thing does work and is so successful.
And I really, I want to underline that safety breeds success. I really want to underline that, because I think one of the things that happens is it's really easy for us to remember what fast actually means in transformation. Years and years ago, I was working with a client who was just working with me so her husband would shut up. You got to tap with Gene. You got to tap with Gene. You got to tap with Gene. I'm like, nah, not the best circumstance to be doing some work. And we went from having a recalcitrant client to 15 minutes later, her being disappointed because a single round of tapping didn't completely clear her childhood trauma. Like in 15 minutes, that's how much your expectations changed. And for those of us who do this work regularly, personally, and working with others, we see compared to other approaches, something that is a very compressed timeline. But it's really easy for us to have a distorted sense of what that looks like. We could be working with something really, really difficult that takes 10, 45-minute sessions. And there's a part of us, it's like, oh my gosh, it's taking so much time. Except when we compare it to other tool sets and other protocols where we're looking at months or years or impossible to change. And so like just recognizing the fact that, okay, if this takes me 3 times to tap on this instead of 1 time to tap on this, that's still really, really awesome. And that's still really, really amazing. And it's so easy to go, oh, I need to do it fast. I love the fact that we spend less time as a community talking about 1 session and 1-minute miracles, but there's still like this expectancy. I want it to be great. I want it to be good. I want it to be right now. This that slow breeds success is like, it's not just an issue of safety, but it's about long-term transformation. And if I do this methodically, I'm going to find more aspects. I'm going to clear out more of the stuff. And it's not going to be they're great for a day or a week or whatever. And it's okay if we spend some time leaning into this particular thing as we're thinking about that transformation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's strange because it's a kind of like, it's a sort of EFT thing, this pressure that comes with it. I mean, Emma and I are always having to talk to our students about this, in our mentoring sessions. Most of the issues that practitioners have come from a sort of false expectation that they put on themselves. That, you know, they might have done 6 sessions with somebody who's actually, you know, we're working with, and the roots of most problems are trauma. You know, actually, you know, that's what, you know, we always come to. So they might have done 6 sessions and be doing some great work, and it's, you know, it's kind of painstaking, and they've clearly got rapport with the person, and they're fretting because they're thinking that it should be, that nothing's happening. Right. Well, actually, has that, you know, every time, you know, we hear it described, it's beautiful what's happening. It's amazing what's happening, and yet there's this kind of striving for, you know, sort of an immediate and magical transformation, you know, and it's happening. You know, it's happening, but we can't transform that quickly. Actually, I've come to realize as human beings, you know, we need time. We have to adjust and adapt and you know, bed things in, and in a new, you know, our reality changes, you know, so we do make changes all the time very quickly with this work, but then we'll meet another challenge because everything changes when we change. Right. We then, you know, we then sort of start doing different things, you know, whether it's just going out the door, that might be the thing, and then
slow as the new fast we used to have as a
that's another word.
I love that. Slow, steady, fast. And I wonder if part of it comes from practitioners feeling like they're on the back foot because they're feeling like they have to justify the work to a skeptical population.
I think, you know, there might be something in that.
Yeah. One of the things that transformed for me as I thought about this, and this was something our friend Mary Ayres shared with me about a decade ago, was the way we evaluate success is by 3 metrics: frequency, duration, and intensity. And I had a client one time say to me, we weren't working on this issue. She was just self-reporting something else that was going on in her life. She said, "Gene, it's amazing. I'm only having seizures 6 days a week." Now that sounds like a living hell to me because that's really, really hard. But she recognized she now had 1 full day a week where it wasn't happening, and the entire day went as planned, and she got to do every single thing that she wanted to do and got ahead because she'd already created like reasonable expectations because that was a possibility. And it would be so easy to look at that and go, oh my gosh, I'm still having seizures, therefore we're not done. And the way that we also, like, the subconscious mind flattens everything into an all or nothing proposition. And so if I'm still experiencing discomfort, then nothing has happened because I haven't taken care of everything. And so I love the fact that, you know, like, I love the fact that you've identified most of the problems that your students are having is they have unrealistic expectations. Happiness is outcome divided by expectations. And being in that circumstance, you know, like when I'm working with families who have children who've been diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and I'm teaching parents to surrogately tap, I'm like, I guarantee you're going to spend 7 minutes a day thinking loving, healing thoughts about your children. That's a win. And if anything else comes from that, because they want way more than that, they're open to that, but just going, no, that's the baseline. We're going to win because you've stopped your day to do this particular thing, and just recalibrating that sense of expectation. And I love the fact for you who are training future practitioners and current practitioners that is this, like, an important message for all of us to be hearing, that slow breeds success. You know, slow is the new fast because it's lifelong lasting change. And I love that that's where that disposition is coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important.
Yeah. And so then kind of like future casting, you know, is, you know, folks, you've been around, you know, longer than I have in this particular stuff, you know, and as you're moving forward and thinking forward in possibilities, like what are the things that are like in your conversations, rattling around your head as you're teaching? Like, what's that future look like? What are those possibilities? How do you think about all of that?
I think that the possibilities are huge. And I think we're at a tipping point with the tapping tipping point. Can I say that? We're certainly getting a lot more psychotherapists and counsellors and medical professionals on our trainings. So the word is getting out there. And I think that's really exciting. So I think there's a bit of adapting to do with the trainings as we go along to sort of meet their needs, because they're slightly different. Well, they're very different actually from the people who are just walking off the street. There's space for both. And that's the way I see it going. I can see it being actually integrated into the mainstream sooner rather than later, actually, which it's been a while coming. We've been working at this for a long time, but it does seem to be happening.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be really important is young people taking it and using it for themselves. There's quite a lot of work being done in schools. I mean, you're probably aware of, and I know you work with children yourself, but I think that whole kind of paradigm shift of people taking responsibility for the way that they feel, I mean, their health, their mental health, physical health, or whatever, but to grow up with that idea that I can manage my emotions. That imagine have that as a child. That you have a sense of having a real relationship with your own kind of emotional world, and not being some sort of scary thing that nobody really seems to understand.
And you're not allowed.
Certainly not. Yeah, not being allowed, being a really big one. That I think that's going to be really, really important. Really
and
important.
I think the beautiful thing about that is, at least from my own experience, is kids just want to feel better, and they don't have 37 skeptical questions that they need to ask before they try something. You're just like, hey, try this thing, you're going to feel better. Like, when I'm working with high school students, I'm like, that sensation you have right when you sit down to take a test, or you get up to give a presentation and your mind goes blank? All that's happened is the capillaries are squeezing shut in your brain, so you can't think. If you do this, you're going to be able to think. You want to do that? And they're like, yes. And like, they're unconcerned about whys and hows and whatever. They have a problem that we can help them to solve, and they do that particular thing.
And move on. So so they're not accumulating kind of baggage, and they're not accumulating the sort of weight of the beliefs about the self aren't true. They're not spending decades laboring under the sort of absurd notion that they're this or that or whatever, and much more able to be in the moment, really, because a lot of not being in the moment is because we can't be, because we're kind of we're attached to the past, or anxious about the future. So it'd be a whole different way of approaching life, really, to not have that be your experience, and maybe we'll get to that stage where becomes the norm for children to be able to process their own emotions, and they'll be coming from a much more empowered place.
And as you were talking about kind of the future and where we're going, I just like one of the things Gary Craig said that just kept ringing in my mind: we're on the ground floor of the healing high rise. And when he said that, like, it always stuck with me. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And 17 years later, after hearing him say that for the very first time, like with every passing year, it makes more and more sense as we get more data and more proof and more sophisticated tools, and going, oh, this is possible, and oh, this is possible, and oh, this is possible, as we're doing that sort of stuff. Like, I love the fact that as we're having this conversation right now, we now know the least we are ever going to know about transformation and healing in the rest of our lifetime.
Nice thought.
And as much as far, like, in the time that we've known each other, how much my experience and depth of knowledge has grown, and going, oh, that's the least I'm ever going to know ever again. And so, but in doing that, going back to what you were saying before, Sue, about even inside of that excitement, giving ourselves permission to grow slowly, deliberately, thoughtfully, healthily, and all of those sorts of things. As much as I love the way Gary taught so many things, like, try it on anything isn't actually what we're talking about here. Like, that's not the safest way for us to be. And 25 years on after him saying that, we're like recognizing, oh, right, like, that's an interesting disposition. Yes, we want to try it on lots and lots of things, but the conversation we're having here in a safe, thoughtful, deliberate way, making sure that we're taking care of everybody involved inside of that.
Yeah, exactly. And never forgetting that we don't actually do anything to anybody that we work with as practitioners. It's all about the inner experience that hopefully we facilitate, and that's what our skill lies in, being able to do that. But yeah, beyond that, it's all, everyone does their own journey.
Yeah. Awesomeness. Well, excellent. Well, as always, I so appreciate you guys' time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you.
If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.